We've said it before, but real estate is one of the best wealth building strategies the beginner investor can engage in.
And today's guests, Daniel and Rebeca Hawthorne, are the embodiment of that principle. From growing up with housing instability as a young person, building a 32-unit portfolio in just 5 years, it's literally a blueprint for how ordinary, everyday people can create extraordinary wealth through strategic real estate investing.
This is the Real Estate Rookie Podcast, and I'm Ashley Kerr.
And I'm Tony J. Robinson, and let's give a big, warm welcome to Daniel and Rebeca. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, welcome to the show. I want to start off with Daniel. Could you walk us through on kind of a high level your journey of getting your first multifamily property?
I had heard about real estate investing, had a number of friends who either had parents who got into it or they themselves did. And it seemed somewhat impossible for me. But nevertheless, I started looking at the BiggerPockets podcast. Really, I think what happened for us was that I ended up in the spot where we had some good capital coming in. And then I started to take a deeper look at the BiggerPockets forum in particular, because I realized, I had a lot of questions despite all the research I had done. And the forum allowed me to tailor the questions towards whatever it was that we were looking for, whether it was, hey, we need to have insurance, or how do we find an agent? How do we even identify what the right market is? Do we invest in the city we live in or elsewhere? And just got a bunch of information through that and was able to really leverage the forum to validate some of the things that I had. And then, of course, we pursued our first property, which was an 8-family unit in not the best part of St. Louis. So we did decide to invest in the city we live in. And it wasn't the best property, but the investment, the listing price and things like that, it allowed us to get into it. And it was turnkey. So it was an easy lift, so to speak. And then we had property management set up and things like that. And so I would say it was, not a part of our portfolio today, but it was certainly the exact multifamily unit that we needed to get started.
Daniel, I want to go back to something you said. You said it seemed impossible. And I think that's such a big statement, but I resonate with it because I know, for me, it seemed like a reach when I first got started. And I'm sure for a lot of rookies that are listening, it can almost feel impossible. But for you specifically, why did it feel impossible? And at what point did you realize it actually was a possibility?
So outside of the capital component, right, which, so this was a $300,000 8-family, multifamily building. And it, when I say that, some people in other markets may be like, wow, 300,000 and with that many units, that's quite the steal. But it is still quite a bit of money, especially for a new investor. But outside of that was just the fact that you're stepping into something you're unfamiliar with, don't have any experience with. At the time, this was in 2020. Our youngest was just 18 months, I believe, and our oldest was 3 at the time. So 2 young kids bouncing off the walls. At some points I felt like even our marriage was at risk, right? Just because of that's what happens when you have young kids. So let alone now we're stepping into investing in something that's going to provide housing for other people and the all the sort of things that come along with that, even with property management. So it was, when I say impossible, it was because of just all the other things we had that we were juggling that was going to make this, less likely to succeed in theory. But in actuality, that's far from what we experienced.
Becca, why did you both decide to end up going towards multifamily as your strategy? There's, short-term rentals, there's flipping, there's all these different strategies. Why did you end up deciding on multifamily?
So for multifamily, we sort of felt like just getting more units at once and being able to take care of them all together at the same time seemed easier than just like, a door all in different places. And, even I have 2 midterm rentals in our 4-plex, and just being able to always be there and flip them like about every 3 months. It's just easier just to have everything under one roof.
I have to agree with that. Like when I worked for a 40-unit apartment complex, like just having everything under one roof, It was, you have one roof to take care of. Everything's in the same place for like one handyman to come take care of that property instead of having 40 single family homes located all around the city. There is that huge advantage. I do want to get into more of your story, but first we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back after this, and we'll hear more about your investment strategy and how you guys have been able to increase your cash flow in just the last couple of years. So we'll be right back. I want to share something with you. What if you could invest in real estate without dealing with tenants, repairs, or saving for a down payment? With Realbricks, you can own a fraction of a rental property for as little as $100 without the headaches of being a landlord. They call it the Robin Hood of real estate because it makes investing as easy as buying stocks. You can invest and Realbricks does the rest. Tenants, maintenance, property management, you just sit back and collect rental income and appreciation. It's the simplest way to start or grow your portfolio. No massive savings, no stress, just real estate working for you. Get started in minutes at realbricks.com.
All right, cool. So we are back here with Becca and Daniel. And I know for both of you, like many real estate investors, part of the motivation to get started is the desire to build generational wealth. And everyone, I think, kind of strives for that for different reasons. But what does it mean to you, or why is it important for you all to kind of have that given the circumstances you guys grew up with?
I was born in Los Angeles, born in South Central in the 80s, which was really, really tough time to live in that part of the country. And not only that, but there was a period of time where myself, two older brothers, and my mom, we were homeless. And I was a little boy, but my mom, would share stories with me around what that was like, living in shelters and things like that, having three little boys at the time, and being a young mom herself. And so those stories throughout my life have been like motivation for me. Whenever I feel like I can't do something or something's impossible, like I shared earlier, those are the things that I kind of look to bring out the inspiration and really to say, you know what, this was also impossible, to be a, Black boy in South Central in the 80s, to make it out and to be where I am today at that point in time. That was also impossible. So I just have defied the odds in a lot of areas of my life, and this real estate is just another way to do that and to bring some value to our kids and the family that we're building, so that they don't have to experience that. Certainly there are other challenges that then come with how do you not have entitled kids and all those sorts of things that come with this, but making sure that from the foundation that we're creating, we don't have to be in a situation. They don't have to be in a situation where they aren't, experiencing lack of housing or situations like that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, Daniel, being candid with your experiences growing up, because I think a lot of the challenges that we face as people shape who we become, and there are different ways to respond to challenges. You can either use them as excuses to not get better, or you can use them as a motivation to find a better situation for yourself. And it sounds like you focus on the latter. But I think the question that I want to ask you that really applies to everyone that's listening, and for all of our rookies that are listening, even if they're not growing up in a tough neighborhood, there's still probably people around them who don't see real estate investing as a path to go down, or who have negative ideas or limiting beliefs around what's possible. So the question that I want to ask you, Daniel, is what do you think it was that you did differently to push out the noise, focus on what's important, and actually put yourself in a position to experience all the success that you found so far today?
I think once we realized that real estate was the path we felt we wanted to go down, surrounding myself with individuals that had already established some level of success, individuals who were in the same stage that we were in, and then also seeking out within those groups, seeking out people who were maybe in similar stages, right? Like, so maybe young parents, interracial couples, others that people of color and things like that. And what that did for us is to, again, validate that, hey, this is possible. And it's not just, someone who's been doing this for 20 years and they've got billions of dollars of assets, right? These are people who, again, haven't gotten their first deal or maybe earlier in their journey. And that, I think it creates, again, this mindset that this is doable. This is something I can achieve. And then from there, you become that person for someone else down the road.
That's such great advice right there. And I've seen a lot of other really successful investors talk about that, how they are pretty open about how they've dropped friends because they don't fit into what their goals are. And they're like, as awful and as mean as that sounds, they want to surround themselves with other successful people. And there's also that saying of like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. Like you always want to be, the person that's trying to achieve where these other people are at, and surround yourself. And it will help you 10x your life, 10x your goals, 10x your success, being around other people that you have these kind of lifestyle skills and, things in common that will be able to help you achieve the success that you're looking for. And that's not necessarily using these people for the resources they have. This is really just being around people who are like-minded can just change what you're capable of. When I first started real estate investing, I didn't know a single investor except the guy that I worked for. And he didn't even know anything about investing. He just did it as a side hustle to his regular business. And when I found, just like you, when I found BiggerPockets, I was in the forums every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can do seller financing. I can do all of these things. And it was life-changing just being able to talk and interact with other investors. But you guys have been able to grow your portfolio over this time from 3 properties to 32 units altogether. So what have you been able to do to be able to create this really impressive portfolio?
I think to start, the first property we acquired, we did do, we had a property manager. We said that, hey, if we purchased anything over 4 units, that our lifestyle was too busy and too consumed already, that trying to manage that ourselves would be a failure. And that PM, although very costly, a lot of things we talk about where it's not their property, so not necessarily bargain shopping for maintenance and things like that whenever things have to happen, or even capital expenditures and things like that. It's not their property, so they have certainly allowed us the capacity to do more. And even with dealing with some of the tenants, right, like early on, even when we were doing some showings, we had some tenants that were asking us, hey, are you going to be the new owner? And I got this thing that I've been waiting on, and already trying to pull us into some of their personal things. And that moment, for the very first unit, the property manager, the projected property manager, was like, see, this is exactly why you need us, kind of thing. And it certainly resonated. But I think just this was also during a time where there was the eviction moratorium. So we purchased in late 2020, and so that in 2021 it was full on COVID, and you couldn't evict tenants, right? And so tenants are very savvy; they're very informed with some of these laws, and so tenants weren't paying rent, and they knew that they didn't have to, and they weren't going to get evicted. Our property manager knew about the different ways to navigate that and get tenants access to funding that would cover their rent, and basically filled out these forms for them and just had them sign. That's stuff we wouldn't have been able to do ourselves. That through that relationship with our PM, we felt like, okay, this is going well. Next time we get some more capital to invest, let's do it again, and let's do it again. And so we've scaled up quickly through leveraging, I'd say, the property manager, having established like insurance, having a playbook for our lease agreements and attorneys and all that sort of stuff, and to the point where now we're doing some things which Becca can share around long term versus midterm, but also being able to take on some of this more ourselves. So in areas where we can, because of the profile of tenants or the area location of the property, it's maybe not as busy, and so we're currently doing some self-management as well as leveraging PM for some of the others.
And I think that's normal to kind of see rookies go from hiring a manager to do it initially to eventually bringing on a PM to help. And I want to get into some of the strategies that you guys are leveraging to really juice some of your cash flow here. But before we jump in, I think the question that might be on every rookie's mind right now is, 32 units, that's a lot of scale in a relatively short period of time. So it sounds like, guys, that you just kind of saved up for that first property, but just kind of give us the quick overview of how you funded those subsequent transactions. Because I think most people can wrap their head around the first deal, but the second or the third and beyond, I think, is where people start to get a little fuzzy. So how did you actually fund the subsequent transactions?
We leveraged HELOCs throughout the entire process. Essentially, we did a HELOC on our primary residence. We had enough equity built in. So we did a HELOC on our primary residence, and we're able to just continue paying that down through some of the cash flow and some of the commission we made from our corporate jobs, our day-to-day jobs.
And when you did this, when you worked with the bank, what type of loan did you do with them? Was it just a conventional investment property? Was it 20% down, 30% down? What were the terms of the loan?
Yeah, so we did the first one, and so we've done 4 deals total. We did a 1031 exchange for one of the buildings. So we've done a total of 4 deals. 3 of those deals have been with 5-year ARMs. And so, you have after 5 years, you have the big balloon payment. We haven't hit 5 years for any of the ones we own today. But the interest rate, the first one was 3.7, somewhere around there. And this last one we did last year, the interest rate 6.2, but it's also a 5-year ARM.
Did you do these on the commercial side of lending instead of with the residential?
All except one. So we have, of the buildings, so we had the 8-family, 2 14-families, and then 1 4-family, which that one was more of the conventional. That's a 3.26% interest, so 30-year for that one.
I would love for you guys to explain what you mean with a 5-year ARM and maybe some of the differences you've experienced going with the commercial side of lending compared to residential side.
We've done all 3 of the bigger units, the commercial multifamily, through U.S. Bank. We've probably interviewed 15 to 20 different lenders out there, and U.S. Bank just has worked and has come back with the best packages. And really what we look for is paying the least amount down as we can, but then obviously balancing that with interest, which then drives those monthly mortgage payments. And so we've had scenarios where maybe we don't pay as much down, but that interest rate's rather high, and therefore the mortgage payments high. U.S. Bank has been really good from that perspective for us, to where they have basically we take. It's been about 20%, I'd say, the first deal. 20% of the listing price was what we had to put down. But as the markets have tightened, and also the value of our, where we're going is increased. They have different limitations around how much they can lend. So the property we just bought last year was $1.4 million. The max they could do for a loan was $900K. So it's well above the 20% benchmark previously, but that through the interest rate that they had, and the mortgage payment and everything else, it made the most sense for us.
And one of the other strategies you mentioned to help you scale was a 1031 exchange. And I've done one of those as well to kind of help move from one property to the next. But can you just kind of give a quick overview of what a 1031 exchange is, and what did you guys sell and what did you end up purchasing with it?
Yeah, for sure. So essentially it's a vehicle to, if you have some capital gains, meaning so you're, what you're all in on the property for, what, at least the IRS sees as you all in on the property for. If you sell the property for something above that, then that's considered earnings and you get taxed for that. So with a 1031 exchange, you can put all or some of that money in a vehicle, a third party, sponsor, that basically allows you to sit that fund, those monies there until you find something. And I believe you have 180 days to go under contract on something. And there's another limitation around how, when you have to close. But essentially you're saying, hey, I don't want to pay taxes on this. I'd rather reinvest this somewhere else.
And how much did you pay for your 1031 exchange? Because in my experience, they're not relatively expensive to do, and it's worth the cost to save on those taxes.
Yeah, so we've done one, and it was a few $100, very inexpensive.
So let's talk about cash flow. Can you guys break down some of the numbers? How are the properties performing, and kind of give us a little insight into that?
I think our with our strategy changing, which I think we're going to get to probably here in a second, we've realized some different things. Basically, if we've continued to operate the way we are or had been, which is all long-term tenants, the cash flow is going to take us a little bit longer to get to the cash flow goals that we have. And essentially, we were about the first year for all properties, and this is kind of one of the expectations sometimes people set is don't expect to make a lot, right? You're taking over a property. There's some learnings that you have. Tenants are going to go maybe because different things, different management, all that kind of stuff. And so just being patient, right? And so because we've purchased the property over the past 4 years, one property every year, we've kind of continued to have that situation where at least our recent acquisition, we see a loss for. And once you get more mature, we've seen about 100 to 125 per door on with our long-term units. So, multiply that by 32 units per month. And then we've shifted recently to furnished midterm units. That's allowed us to really magnify our cash flow and really optimize a lot at the same time.
So now that you have these properties and you've built up this successful portfolio, it seems like, Daniel, you kind of took the lead as to being the person that wanted to start in real estate. So Becca, how have you been able to kind of integrate yourself into helping build this portfolio?
I was working in healthcare during COVID, just the regular hours. And then we had our 2 daughters, and I, actually I was pregnant. So I left the hospital. And whenever I did that, our CPA was like, Becca, like, if you're interested, it would really help you guys if you would get your real estate license. The first year I wasn't able to get it in time. We ended up just like calculating my hours and like logging everything, which was sort of difficult. And then the next year I was able to get my license, which was helpful. And then it also is very helpful because whenever we're looking at properties, I just cutting the middleman out and being able to just do all the things, having direct contact with people selling the properties and such, was very nice. And then my broker, I actually ended up asking our property management, that broker, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll hold your license. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just doing this for us. Like, I'm not going to be doing it for other people and homes, but it's a nice little group of investors. So it's fun, and I learn a lot from all of them. But then, so then after I got my license, I became a little bit more involved. And what were we doing to where your friend mentioned I wanted to do midterm? I wanted to furnish. I really wanted to furnish some stuff. And he said, yeah, you can list it on Furnish Finder. So we renovated and furnished our first unit in a 4-plex, listed it, and I had so many healthcare providers from COVID. Like, it was just nonstop. I think we were charging like $1,000 for a unit, and then I listed it for $2,000, and for 2 years with barely any vacancies, like maybe 2 weeks in between, if that. Sometimes I would have the next tenant moving in like the next day. But yeah, I even had like one that was 3 months, and then they kept re-signing for a year, and they had their baby in there, and I like saw the little baby like become 1 year old. I'm like, oh wow, that's a long time that you guys have been here. And so that was pretty awesome. And then we did it again and kept them busy and filled. I dropped it down a little bit just once COVID sort of leveled out, because the nurses, and well, not just nurses, all the healthcare travelers were getting paid a little bit less. And I joined Facebook groups and would talk to traveling nurses and sort of see from the outside in and look at like what was going on, if they were getting paid more, what they wanted in their units and that kind of stuff. But really they were on there just to like look for furnished places. So yeah, I would get my leads from Furnish Finder. And then most recently we switched over and started using apartments.com, and I still get my leads from Furnish Finder. And then we sort of use apartments.com to manage and collect rent and all that. It just makes it easier to have it all together. But oh yeah, and then I just did another one. So I furnished another unit in January. So now we have 3 midterm rentals that are doing pretty well. I really like to do all the handy stuff myself because I sort of grew up doing it. My dad was a contractor, and so that's been fun. And my first one I actually flipped completely myself with my little cousin on winter break. He helped me out, and I gave him some cash and gave me an extra set of hands, and we did that in 8 weeks, and we gutted it.
I love that. And I love that you guys are experimenting with different strategies. And again, I feel like that's a hot button topic right now for rookies, is asking the question like, well, where can we get the best returns? And, you know, Daniel, you mentioned earlier, 120 to 125, somewhere in that ballpark per door on the long-term side. And, you know, if you can exponentially increase that number with a little bit more work, furnishing the place, getting it renovated, it may be worthwhile. Do you guys anticipate, because you said right now, Beck, it's 3 out of the 32. Do you guys anticipate converting more of your current long-term over to the furnished to midterm?
Yeah, I think so. I think also from what I'm seeing, like a lot of young professionals, they don't really have the cash to put down furniture, but they want to live in that really cute space and make it feel like home. And I think not only just traveling healthcare providers, but just people wanting furnished property they're liking. And with the healthcare providers too, it's like they're pretty low key tenants. They just sleep or work and pretty respectful of our stuff. And I mean, after several years, I don't really have to fix, nothing's really been broken. And I really try to get furniture and textiles that will stand the test of time to sort of help with that. But I think we'll keep doing it if we can.
Yeah, we looked at short term, right? The whole Airbnb Verbo style. And then with all of the uncertainty around that market, but then just hearing different things go on in some of those units, knowing that you'd have to potentially turn over a unit or clean a unit daily, right? Like all those things really turned us away. And so meanwhile, St. Louis is a pretty big hub with traveling healthcare professionals. Mm-hmm. There's a shortage of them. And so they'll bring them in and looking for a place to stay. And so what better place to stay in than what we have to offer. And I think, in addition to that, Becca loves to bargain shop. And so she's going to Restoration Hardware, or Pottery Barn Outlet. Yeah. Finding stuff and saying, oh, this will be good for a future unit. And I'll be like, I'm a numbers guy. I'm like, well, we don't have that unit right now. So even though it's 90% off, we don't need that furniture. And so just sit in our basement until we're ready to use it.
Yeah, or we switch out furniture in our house a lot. I'll buy furniture and we'll put it in our house and be like, well, we don't need that anymore. So we'll push it off to the unit. So that's fun.
I'm laughing because we have the same conversation in my household, and it's like my wife will buy things for properties that don't yet exist, and then they just live in our garage for months at a time. And we just cleaned out the garage not too long ago. We ended up giving away blinds that only fit a certain specific window, and it's we gotta get rid of some of this stuff. But I want to go back to one thing you mentioned, was hey, it was your tax professional that encouraged you guys to, or for at least one of you to go out and get your real estate license. For rookies that are kind of unfamiliar with why your tax professional encouraged that, what was the benefit of you guys doing that?
For the tax cuts, pretty much she said, well, Rebeca, if you could make this your job, your career, then we can, give you more tax breaks, which is great because whenever you see it on the paper, before we turn in our taxes, it's oh, wow, okay, this is really helpful.
Yeah, so I have a full-time corporate job, and essentially she said, hey, Becca stopped working full time before we had our second daughter. And she's been doing some stuff on the side, even started her own design business, which ties back into what we're doing here. But essentially because of that, our CPA said, hey, you know that you could be a real estate professional. You just got to demonstrate 750 hours a year, which not having a full-time job you can do. Like obviously me having a full-time job, that would be a little red flag, right? Like, hey, this person's not doing that. And so that first year we heard about it, our CPA basically said you could save $20,000 in taxes if Becca was a real estate professional. And so I think probably the next week, Becca's, signing up to get into that program.
So I did hear that you guys had a very unfortunate tenant situation that cost you $30,000 on one of your recent acquisitions. How did you handle that, and what actually happened with this tenant?
Yeah, so we bought what is by far our best property so far. And this was one that we were very excited about. The day after we closed, I get a call from the seller that said, hey, we need to talk. Got some just information I want to share you, nothing big, but just, got to update you. And what he shared was that there's a tenant that had basically a fraudulent caretaker in the unit, someone who was supposed to be taking care of this elderly tenant, but didn't have the credentials, ended up being someone who was more of a nuisance and had been doing drugs in the unit, had been threatening other tenants, and all sorts of things have been going on. They had a right to possession with an attorney that it was supposed to happen within weeks of us taking over the property. That didn't happen because there's just so much that has to go into actually taking possession over a property, and also depends on the state that you're in. And so 2 or 3 months of multiple calls with the attorney, going to the unit ourselves, multiple calls with the police.
And the tenants always like keeping us updated too, because they were always letting us know like what was happening around with that guy.
Mm-hmm. Tenants moving out because of it. They just couldn't deal with it anymore. And essentially it was just someone who said, hey, I don't have the credentials to get paid for, taking care of this tenant. So I'm just going to destroy this tenant's unit to get my money's worth. That was effectively what he told the tenant. And the tenant was sort of hostage. They were not fully disabled, but this person actually nailed a 2x4 on the other side of the single door that got you into the unit. And they also nailed the windows. So that way no one could get in. And, if they needed to get out, they could unscrew the 2x4 that was on the window, and they would climb through the window. But this elderly guy couldn't really do that. So it was just
he was actually in a wheelchair. And one night, a tenant like sent us a video of the wheelchair that was like down the basement steps. So that was like sort of scary for us because we were worried about our tenant. So
yeah, so it was months of these stories, tenants moving out, and it was definitely not the highlight of our investment at that time. And so finally we got past it. The tenant and the individual ended up being out of the unit, threatened someone, had some drugs on him, and that resulted in that the police coming out. And because of the drugs, they actually booked him. They took him to jail. And they said, hey, he's probably going to be released in the morning. This was late at night, 11 p.m., I believe. He's probably going to be released in the morning. Whatever you need to do it now. And so myself, and we did have the previous property management, they were kind of helping out as they transitioned. And so myself and the lead guy over there, we went to the actual tenant and said, hey, what's going on? Got his side of the story, and just we're like, hey, do you want this person in here? He said no, so we had him file a restraining order, and that ultimately is what allowed us to keep this guy, who was the fraudulent caretaker, away. And from that point on, we still had to go to court to make it official, and then that was sort of our finally, like, at least them in the unit, they both transitioned out, but then we had a bunch of damage to address, and that's where Becca's handy woman work came in, and we spent another, I'd say, basically turning
There was a
full time.
motorcycle in the kitchen, and diapers were like shoved in the wall for some reason. We don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was. They had street signs. They had
Oh yeah, street signs they stole, which the police couldn't prove that he stole.
yeah. It
We've
was
heard
a
some
lot of
interesting
surprises.
stories, but that's got to be one of the more interesting. Like, it's not even a tenant issue; it's someone that the tenant hired that's the
Yeah.
issue, which is all the more interesting. I guess just one other question, just from my own understanding. The lease was signed with the disabled person in the wheelchair, not this caretaker, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
he was
interesting.
pretty much a squatter, the other guy.
Oh, okay. Is that how they would handle it? It's interesting that they could squat in a unit that someone else has a signed lease for, and it wouldn't be easier for you guys to get them out. I've never, I've never experienced anything like that. Ash, I don't know if you have, but I guess just going through that experience, guys, like, I mean, I don't know if there is a way that you could have like avoided that or handled that differently, but I guess were there any lessons you learned going through that experience that you would apply to any future deals or transactions?
Yeah. Fortunately, it's one of those things where it there's some protections you can do. One is like extra due diligence, like making sure you check every unit, um, getting the leases up front, all this. But even with that, so in this case, and they don't call them squatters, because squatter is someone who took possession of a property that they didn't have necessarily, and then they established residency over time. Whereas this case, they were invited by the tenant to be there. They kind of had a key, so they're they're considered a tenant at that point. So in the state of Missouri, you there's just not a lot of laws around that. I know Texas recently passed something that in these types of scenarios there's more protection, but that doesn't exist in Missouri.
There's we talked about this in the podcast, gosh, I don't know, maybe 18 months ago, give or take. But there's a guy, I think he was like a previous bounty hunter. Do you remember this, Ashley? And he started this service.
Yeah, he has like a really cool name. What is it? It's like Flash or something. I don't know.
Yeah, some name that you would assume would do a job like this, right? Like just like a real cool guy name. But he would basically squat on squatters. So landlords could pay him, and then he and his team, they were all like, again, they were like bounty hunters, like ex-military, some sort of like field like that. They would observe, get to know like when they go in and when they go out. And when the squatter would leave the property, they would go in, break in, and squat on top of him and just live there until the person moved out. And he had done it multiple times with multiple different squatters, and the success rate was like 100%. So I guess for anyone that's listening that needs like I wouldn't say like a nuclear solution, but if you're looking for maybe a creative way to get a squatter out, go find someone who's a better squatter than they are to kind of invade their space.
Oh, that's great. I wish we had known. The ideas we came up with that we didn't go through with were, put a snake in the unit.
Well, you definitely had a tricky situation where there was an actual tenant in there that wasn't giving you problems, and then it was just the caretaker. But thank you guys so much for joining us today and sharing your story. Can you let us know where everyone can reach out to you and find out more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So my email is hawthorned12@gmail.com. Facebook is Daniel Hawthorne. I'm off all other social media, but those are the ones that I have right now. And LinkedIn is the other social media.
Oh, I don't really look at my email that much, so just connect him and then he'll let me know if you need me.
We really appreciate you both taking the time to come and share your experiences here with us on the Real Estate Rookie Podcast. I'm Ashley and he's Tony, and we'll see you guys next time.